by approaching the patient that way and their wall, their resistance that way, Davanloo is modeling for the patient how to stand up to the more self-destructive part of them. The therapist, Davanloo in this case, look at the pains he's taking to bring everything into bold relief. Here is the situation we're in. Summarizing. This is to bring the patient along with him. Is this, in other words, do we have consensus that this is the situation we are in? Now, the response is so telling, right? The patient himself had already mentioned this 2 or 3 times. All that Davanloo is doing is reflecting it back. That's all he's doing, okay? And the patient goes, I don't know what you mean. So he pulls the rug out from underneath, okay? Unconsciously, probably. But the issue is this, that if he were to concede to Davanloo that, yes, you understood me accurately, that would bring them closer. That would be a kind of emotional intimacy. The patient cannot tolerate that. So he has to pull out the rug out from underneath. And there's always a risk that when you do that, that the patient might feel criticized. But at a certain point, you have to take a crack at the egg, right? You can't just tiptoe around people indefinitely. At some point, you have to call it like it is.
Well said.
It's true. At the same time, Davanloo is trying to turn the patient against their defenses, where they can see that what they thought was their friend is not their friend.
Wow.
So this is called the management of syntonic character resistance in intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy. So over to you, Johannes.
Yeah. So this article that you just mentioned, it was authored by Dr. James Schumel, and people should know that I got his permission for us to do this. So this is above board. And the way we got here was that Rose reached out to me and said, could you do something on, in fancy, it's called Syntonic Defenses, which means that these are defense mechanisms, meaning what we do to avoid feelings and avoid letting people close to us, but we're not always conscious of them. And syntonic defenses, what that means in plain English is that we are identified with that defense. We don't see it as a defense. We see it as, well, this is just part of who I am. This is my personality.
It's like an automatic behavior, and we don't see it hurting us. We just do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of who we are, and oftentimes we like it. We're not interested in giving up those defenses, and that poses a real difficult challenge for the therapist, because part of the therapist's job is to help the client see that what is driving and perpetuating their psychological pain, and sometimes somatic pain, are these very defense mechanisms that at one point in our lives was a lifeline, and it helped us get through a difficult childhood oftentimes. And so the therapist has a lot cut out for them, right? It's their job to help the client see that what used to be a lifeline for the client is actually not part of who they really are. They're just strategies. They're ways to avoid dealing with difficult things, and then help the client let them go. So when the client is thinking, well, what do you mean? This is part of my personality. You can see what a formidable obstacle that is for the therapist. Right?
What is this? Okay, so go ahead. Can you role play that?
Yeah, so my idea was, instead of talking in the abstract about this, let's just do a transcript. Let's just do a Davanloo transcript. Davanloo developed intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy. It's a helpful reference point. So let's just do that. And I'm not speaking as an expert on Davanloo. There are many more people that are more qualified to do that than I am. I'm just speaking as a real appreciator of Davanloo. I have a real fondness and appreciation for him. He's not to be idealized. He certainly wasn't perfect, but my God, did he have a lot on the ball. He was a genius in many ways. So without further ado, why don't we get after it?
Let's go.
Okay, so we're going to be looking at the case of the BB gun man, okay? And I'll be the therapist, and Rose, you'll be the patient. Okay, so the therapist begins. What is the problem that you went to the center for help?
Trouble with coping with everyday situations and negative situations.
Okay, trouble in coping with everyday situations.
Yes, negative situations.
Okay, and then there's commentary, and the commentary is, as we see, the patient is vague and the therapist is attempting to understand the nature of his problems in a gentle, clarifying manner. And that's important initially. You'll see later in the transcript, it doesn't seem so gentle, but
No,
initially
it does.
it's quite gentle in the beginning, and that's important. Okay. Therapist. So let me see. You say trouble with coping with negative situations. What is that?
If everything is not in order, rosy, perfect, I get upset.
You say the trouble with coping with everyday situations.
Yeah.
Well, could you give a specific example? What is that?
Okay, well, work is not up to date. Car trouble.
What?
Car trouble.
Okay, so one is the car trouble. You have a problem with the car.
Yes.
Another one is you have too much work, and the other one is car trouble. So
Yeah.
sidebar, really quick. I just want to make a comment here. Notice how the therapist, Davanloo in this case, takes the pains to really make sure that he's understood the client. He doesn't just keep going. He reflects, he summarizes what the patient has said, reflects it back to him so that there can be clarity, so that the therapist and the client, that they're in lockstep, always on
And
the
the
same
client
page.
feels validated.
Exactly. So exactly, not only for clarity purposes, but also so that the client feels heard and understood. Like this person is actually bothering to try to understand what I'm saying to him. It's so important. Okay.
Yes. Instead of being dismissed and saying, well, it's not a real problem,
Yes.
the therapist repeats it back. And also the patient can actually hear it as well and then grasp it a little bit better.
Yes. So
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Let's keep going. Okay.
Yep. Things like, yeah, this is a response. Yeah, things like that.
Therapist, what do you mean by things like that? One, you're talking that you have a car problem.
Uh-huh. And any unfinished task I'm talking about.
Okay. Unfinished task. So that stays in your mind?
Yeah.
So what do you mean by unfinished task?
Oh, well, I could be home. I mean, working all day Saturday.
You say unfinished task.
Yes.
And my question is, what do you mean by unfinished task? Let's sidebar. Let's sidebar.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
what hopefully what you're noticing in the audience is that the client is not very specific, but prefers to be general and vague. You see how it's hard to form a picture of what the client is actually talking about. So as a therapist, you want to have a picture in your mind. You want to be able to picture everything the client is saying. And in my opinion, the reason that Davanloo keeps asking for clarification and specificity is he's not getting a picture. Like you can't picture this really. You get a very vague, general idea of things, and that's not enough to do therapy. Yeah. One more point
Yes.
before we proceed. Davanloo said that oftentimes in the first 5 minutes of the initial session, the heart of the client's problem is revealed if you know how to attend to that in the first 5 minutes of the first initial session. And so any observations on what might be this client's core problem?
So what I see is sort of this detachment, this detached, like I'm not really here, really don't want to be here. Like, I don't know, something. What's the word?
Yes.
Yes, that's absolutely right, Tovah. The patient is not very involved. They're not
Yes.
alarmed, they're not very upset or concerned about getting to the bottom of anything. They might as well be talking about cloud constellations, you know?
Or that someone else sent them. That's the other thing as
Like
well.
they showed
In
up to
this
therapy, so
situation,
they're there, and they're like, okay, so
Yeah.
his wife sent him type thing. Yeah.
Yes,
So
right.
he's not involved.
Not involved. That's the thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's some commentary. So, and this is sort of restating what we just said, right? The patient is detached and totally non-involved. So Tovah, you're right on the money. There's a definite presence of the resistance against emotional closeness, and there is no anxiety. But the therapist does not address any of the patient's character defenses and attempts to help the patient by asking for specific examples. So that's kind of a lot to take in right there, right? So he mentions
is.
totally detached, non-involved. And then he references what he calls resistance against emotional closeness. In layman's terms, that means that what you were saying, Tovah, about being disengaged and not really there, it means that when someone is like that, it's impossible to get close to them. It's just not possible. It's a way for them to hide their true self, their true feelings, their true priorities and concerns.
So even if you just jumped in and said, "Well, what are you feeling?" They wouldn't be a connection. They would just be in their head.
Yes.
Okay. So go ahead. Show us how you would connect the client with the feelings to help them heal their anxiety and their potential. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's just acknowledge that that's a tall order. It's a tough thing to do because just like you said, by asking about feelings, that would just roll off like the water on a turtle's back. Right. That won't make so the first thing is to try to help the client see that, their status quo, how they're living their life is not so great for them. Like if the client is not connected, that there's something painful in their life, right? Then they're not going to be motivated to investigate anything, let alone their feelings.
Yeah.
So the first thing is there a problem here to work on or isn't there? And Davanloo's having a hard time getting a foothold to get the patient to emotionally declare, yeah, there's a problem.
Yes.
Okay. So Rose, did you, anything else there in the commentary that we should read?
Okay. Yes. What I'd like is the focus is that in the interview, his mind is somewhere else. And this is an important acknowledgement because the client is actually hiding, keeping away, keeping the therapist, keeping the inquirer away from his true feelings. And he needs to be vague. He needs to hold that vagueness as strongly and as long as he possibly can, so no one will get to know his true feelings. And we often call it being behind the wall, which is a wall. They put up a safety wall, and that wall is so strong. And, we call it pillar defenses. Defenses are keeping us away from our true feelings and away from anyone who would want to reach out.
Yes.
And as Johanna said earlier on, the therapy starts in a very inquiring sort of way, in a motherly way, if you want to put it that way. What's the problem? I notice you've got a sore knee. Would you like me to help you? Let's have a look at that sore knee. And as soon as the therapist sort of puts that out there, the patient gets vague because the therapist might find out something about the patient that the patient doesn't want, is ashamed of, maybe, is probably the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
And
so this is the sort of patient where it's very difficult to do an inquiry, to ask questions about what brings them to therapy and what the problem is, because the patient is so guarded. They're so guarded. They're so
and let
guarded.
me just make a statement. This is not to make anybody who's listening feel bad. We've all been patients that I call it being uncomfortable with uncomfortable being intimate with our clothes on. Like, it's not comfortable. And we're either talking a lot or not talking at all. So this is a human quality. So it's for us to simply understand we all do it, and it doesn't help us get to the chronic pain or the anxiety unless we can, like Rose will say to me, scaffold, and get to the feeling. So it's hard. Let's just make a point. This is hard.
Yeah, and Tovah, also, there's a reason why people are so guarded. If they had wonderful experiences allowing people close to them, they wouldn't have built that wall. They obviously did not have a wonderful experience allowing people close to them. So, like I said, these kind of defenses, walls, they were a lifeline at one point in the patient's life.
Really important.
So thank you for underscoring that point.
Yes, very important to keep.
Okay, so shall we?
Right. Shall we? Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, therapist, right now a tape recorder is unfinished and your mind is there.
Yes.
While you are here.
There is a part of it that's there.
You smile when I say that.
No, because I don't want you to think that I'm not interested in the conversation.
I don't
Can
want.
we stop? Can we pause for a moment? Can you see the defiance in the patient?
Like
see the
caring what the
defiance?
doctor
That's the
thinks,
defense.
caring what the doctor thinks. It's
Yeah,
like
you
a-
see
No,
defiance.
it's not letting the doctor in.
Right, right. He's also engaged in impression management. He's focused on the impression he's conveying to Dr. Davanloo. It's part of the wall. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Um,
Wow, that's a biggie. That's a biggie for all of us to look at how we keep saying I'm sorry, or we keep, like somehow I see it. I see it. And it's you feel it's sad because you see the person maybe a little close.
You're drawing away.
Yeah, it's really important to look at that. Again, we're here just to make people aware that this is also a way they can break through by seeing this about themselves.
well, you can't let go of anything unless you're first aware of it. Let's get that right.
Important.
That's right.
Right.
Okay, continue.
Yes. Okay. Where were we? I think here. Therapist. Uh-huh. So could we look into this? You say you're
I know
not.
you've moved.
Oh, okay. Take it over.
Uh, uh, I'll repeat mine.
Yeah.
No, because I don't want you to think that I'm not interested in the conversation.
That's where we are. Thank you. Therapist.
Yeah.
I don't want you, and so forth. You see, you're smiling when you talk about that.
Yes, because I'm not totally here, you see.
Uh-huh. So could we look into this? You say you're not totally here. That means a part of your mind is with the tape recorder. Part of your mind is there.
I don't know what you mean.
Okay, so sidebar. The therapist, Davanloo in this case, look at the pains he's taking to bring everything into bold relief. Here is the situation we're in. Summarizing. This is to bring the patient along with him. In other words, do we have consensus that this is the situation we are in? Now, the response is so telling, right? The patient himself had already mentioned this 2 or 3 times. All that Davanloo is doing is reflecting it back. That's all he's doing, okay? And the patient goes, I don't know what you mean. So he pulls the rug out from underneath, okay? Unconsciously, probably. But the issue is this, that if he were to concede to Davanloo that, yes, you understood me accurately, that would bring them closer. That would be a kind of emotional intimacy. The patient cannot tolerate that. So he has to pull out the rug out from underneath. Okay?
Yes. Could I also mention that if he maybe has back pain, that it might become activated? If he has, whatever, the somatic situation may become activated.
Wow.
Yes.
Just to sort of keep that in the back of your mind.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know what you mean. Okay, it's your turn now.
Yes. Therapist, you say a part of your mind is there.
Yes.
And I question you, what way a part of your mind is there?
I don't know what you mean by that way. What way? I always do. I keep planning.
Yes. So sidebar, notice the patient, because he's had such bad experiences allowing people close to him, he doesn't want to give Davanloo an inch of common ground. So he keeps, in a sense, jerking Davanloo around, saying something, then denying it. Okay? He's not necessarily doing this consciously, but it's a tactic to keep the therapist at bay. This is what we mean by resistance against emotional closeness. Okay.
Yes.
So at this point, the therapist asks for another example, and the patient says that they are moving at the end of the month, and his mind is constantly with the moving, what to do first and what to do next. Then he is asked for another example. At home, his mind is on his job, what he has to do first, how he's got to finish the job while eating supper. His mind is somewhere else. Well, nothing specific. What emerges is that his mind is on so many issues, which he tries to put out of his mind by watching television, but he can't get interested in the TV. So then the question is raised if his preoccupation with so many tasks interferes with his sexual activity. he indicates that he avoids sex. Sidebar, and maybe we should talk about that a little bit. I have some thoughts, but what are yours?
Well,
Why would he want to have sex with someone that he's probably annoyed with? That was my thought.
That was your thought? Yeah.
Yeah.
is there a reason this gentleman came to therapy? Is he anxious? Is he stressed? Is he having relationship issues? Is that important to know?
Well,
We don't know yet.
Davanloo tried to find out, and remember, the response was vague. It says problem coping with negative situations.
Yeah, a problem coping with negative situations.
Yes.
But he keeps creating them in his life. See, this is interesting because, it's not, again, when I talk to someone and we want people to take responsibility but not feel blamed. And it's a thin line between, but you're creating the conflict, you're creating the drama. And so how in a way do we, this is very clear, because I kind of want to say, well, why does everything feel bad? I mean, what's going on? What glasses are you wearing? What's your mindset? But Davanloo's got a way, I think, that I've learned from Rose, because it wouldn't, in Israel, we talk about tachlis, bottom line. That's not going to get the person to feel, because this is a skill they've not done for years.
Well, let me pick up on that. So it's true that it's a delicate balancing act between helping people see their own role and their own suffering, the portion of their pain that they're the architect of, but without piling on and inducing shame or self-attack, right? And so I'm glad you brought that up. So let's just keep that in mind as we go. My comment here is, notice that Davanloo asks about his sex life, right? He says, these difficulties, do they interfere in your sex life? See, from my point of view, part of the reason for that is that he's picking up on the fact that the patient is talking about all this like it's not a great problem. It's like he's talking about the weather. So he wants to start tilting things in the direction of, this is problematic. This is creating some pain for you. But you'll see, the patient won't give him an inch. You'll see. Okay. So, therapist, so this, in a sense, interferes with your sexual activity.
Well, I wouldn't say that it interferes.
See? He keeps pulling the rug out from underneath. He won't offer an inch. No common ground. Okay? Patient starts to ruminate, and the therapist clarifies his vagueness and his need to ruminate. Now we have the first attempt by Davanloo to make him acquainted with some aspects of his character defenses, meaning the defenses that he's carried for a long time, and they've become habit. Okay.
Yes. Now we're moving from the external to the internal workings.
Yeah.
Davanloo tried to reach him through the external, where the worry is, what's causing the worry. And now Davanloo's moved another step closer. And often, if I could just mention that in our ISTDP world, what we do is we go on to start on external, and then we try and move closer and closer gently to reach the patient, to reach beneath the defenses or around the defenses. So just that, my little
great
addition there. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, therapist. Do you see here with me, you are vague and try to ruminate over things. Do you notice this?
Well, I try and
ruminate.
Yeah.
Do you notice that?
Because I'm not sure of my feelings, my emotions. I'm not sure. I'm swimming here, but I'm trying.
But do you notice that you ruminate? You still didn't answer the question.
You mean mentally ruminate, verbally ruminate?
That you ruminate about this rather than to say does or doesn't.
You say it interferes. Well, I don't see it's an interference. It dampens it slightly.
Yeah, but you see, this is what I'm saying, is this dampens it slightly, and this and that, huh?
Well, yeah, that's the way I talk.
Right. But we're here to look at this. I said, do you ruminate or don't you ruminate?
Yeah, I do.
You do
Can
ruminate.
we?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
This
yes.
is a pivotal point.
Yes.
This is a pivotal point. He's actually admitted. Sorry, Johannes. I just wanted to. Yeah.
Exactly right. So here
Yeah.
he offers some common ground finally. You see how
Yes.
relentless Davanloo was, right? And there's always
Yes.
a risk that when you do that, that the patient might feel criticized. But at a certain point, you have to take a crack at the egg, right? You can't just tiptoe around people indefinitely. At some point, you have to call it like it is.
Well said.
Okay.
Good.
So, so the patient says, "Yeah, I do." So, therapist, you do ruminate. Now, this is important that we look at this. Are you a specific person?
I'm very specific about everything.
So you are specific. You say you're in a state of limbo when you talk about the tape recorder. You are here, part of you is with the tape recorder. You are in your office, a part of you is with your tape recorder. You're at home, a part of you is at your job, huh? So isn't that a state of limbo? You're neither at the job, you're neither at home. You know yourself better than I know you.
I don't know. That's the way I am. I'm describing to you how I am.
Do you see? Even right now, when I suggest to you to look at it, you want to be evasive about it. You're at your job, your mind is with the tape recorder.
Uh-huh.
Okay. You are with the tape recorder, your mind is somewhere else. You're in bed with your wife, your mind is with the job. You're here, your mind is with the tape recorder. Isn't that a state of limbo or what?
If that's a description of the state of limbo,
Well, let's not say what I say. What would you say this is? I say this is a state of limbo, but what would you say it is?
what's the state of limbo?
You tell me what is the state of limbo,
Hanging in the middle of nowhere.
or actually limbo, and then I say hanging in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, right in the clouds.
Right. Okay. You want a sidebar around that segment? Thoughts? Observations?
Well, there's a nice dialogue going on about, and he and even in Rose's intonation, it's kind of like a little less defensive and a little bit more like, I feel safe with you. I feel safe with you.
Well, also there's heat coming up in this conversation. The patient, there's heat coming up in the patient. They don't know it yet, but the responses would say this heat is
Yeah.
the adversarial part is coming out. Before they were vague all over the shop. Now all of a sudden, because of the persistent
Yes.
dialogue, the heat is rising in the patient. So Davanloo has now got a patient with him. He's got
Yeah.
someone who's ready to go there, so to speak.
Yeah, notice that Davanloo is trying to get a foothold. He starts off by trying to help the patient see that he's not very precise. That doesn't really go anywhere. So he shifts gear and he goes to this whole thing about limbo, being here but not here. Davanloo is trying to get a foothold here. And
Yep.
yeah, they seem to be covering some ground. Okay, so from the above passage, we can make the following observations. The therapist focuses on the compartment of the defense, which gives rise in the transference and rise in the anxiety in the form of tension in the muscles of the hand and of the forearm, which indicates the discharge pattern of the unconscious anxieties in the form of tension in the striated muscles, and that there is no indication of any disruption of the thought processes. So in plain English, that means that, remember at the beginning, there was no anxiety, right? He mentioned the patient was not anxious at all, which is not a good thing. That means they're not involved at all, right? But now he's observing some tension in the forearms, okay? And that lets him know there is now some anxiety, like Rose mentioned, heat, when complex feelings are getting stirred up. And the therapist can take a sigh of relief that he doesn't have to worry about the patient falling apart on him. There's some sturdiness in the patient, as evidenced by the voluntary muscles activation.
Yes.
Okay.
You can actually feel it in the dialogue, can't you?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The patient becomes straightens their back and sort of gets ready to
Mhm.
react. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Is it
So
your
we'll go
turn or
over
my
the,
turn?
yeah, let's go to the transcript. Therapist. Now let's look at this. I question you. Are you a specific person or are you a vague person?
I'm lost.
Oh, well, it's underneath
Oh,
that.
here, no, I've got it. I've got it. I've got it.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, folks. No, I find myself very specific.
What way are you specific?
I like things that are exact, precise.
Could you give me an example?
I like everything done right.
Yeah, but I like everything done right. That is vague in general.
To me, it's not. If I'm being specific when I say everything,
But what is specific about that? And look right now, you are again ruminating. You are not able to give a specific example. You prefer to generalize, and you are smiling now, and you notice the way you're sitting also. Your leg is like that, and your hand is there.
yeah, so what's wrong with that? I could say the same thing about you. What's wrong with the way I sit?
How do you feel right now?
Fine.
Fine is vague. So if we do a sidebar, let's do a sidebar. This can seem antagonistic. This can seem antagonistic, okay? But it's important to remember that Davanloo is trying to reach the healthy part of the patient that actually wants to learn about himself, that actually wants help, okay? And he's trying to get a foothold, right? But he doesn't get very far with that. So he has to really begin to start pointing out these defenses a little more forcefully. Is there a risk with that? Of course there is a risk with that. And if you're a therapist watching this, don't try this at home. This is not supervision. This is hopefully just meant to inspire and give you something to think about and discuss. Working like this takes a lot of training, lots of training. So
And
this
if
is
you're
not,
a patient, and if you're a potential patient, what is your advice for them to feel hope and feel?
yeah, well, to get curious about themselves, right, and hopefully feel some inspiration to learn about how they operate themselves, both internally and externally.
Exactly. And this patient has got vagueness about them,
Right.
and that's their way of, ruminating.
Yeah, and again, sometimes we'll be talking a lot and it's still vague. So it's
Yeah,
not, it's
yeah.
Yeah.
really
See
what
Susie
he's
says.
saying in the relationship, because we learned a lot in the last 2.5 years, Rose and I, about how important the relationship is between the therapist and the patient. And for them to feel safe and for them to feel honest, they can be honest, and that they can utilize this relationship, this mock relationship, as a safe place. They can go out in the world and be safe with people and be safe with themselves. That's what I think is beautiful. Potentially people can understand that this relationship between the therapist and the client is part of the potential healing of the patient.
Yes, but
Well,
speaking
it is.
to that, and also this comment here, someone said it does seem very antagonistic,
Good.
right?
Can we address that too?
Yes, yeah, I was just about to. So
Yeah.
the thing is this, that ideally it would go the way you're saying, Tova. It would be a more gentle affair. Okay, the problem is that some of us, our defenses are so tenacious and unfortunately a bit self-destructive too. Okay, and there's that kind of a self-destructive component where the person is prickly and they're just going to keep pushing you away. They might offer you a little common ground, but then they push you away. When that happens, you sometimes have to be a little more forceful. But at some level, ideally, the patient will know that you're speaking to their potential, right? That the reason that you bother to be so direct is because at some level you know what the person's potential is. You can sense that. And you don't want, it's an act of compassion. You don't want them to be trapped under these self-destructive walls. It's actually a way of reaching for the healthy part of the patient and communicating to the self-destructive side, I got your number. Your typical song and dance that may work in other relationships, it's not going to work with
Yeah.
me.
But I know, yes. I know the real you. I know there's a real you underneath
I saw nothing harsh in there, or nothing that wouldn't. It almost, there was some caring. Like if the patient could perceive, well, this guy's, I'm not scaring him away. He's sticking around.
Right.
That's true. That's well said, Tovah. He's sticking around no matter what.
Yeah, he's letting the patient know you're in good hands. I can handle you and your defenses. But I agree, it can seem antagonistic. So thank you for the comment.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving right along, you're next, Rose.
Okay. I feel like, why the hell is he pointing out that about the way I'm sitting?
Now you say, what the hell? And I question, how do you feel? You say, what the hell? But what the hell is not a feeling. Okay. So there is challenge here, right? And the patient is clearly feeling criticized, right? This is, by the way, I just want to say this is an unusual case. In most cases, we don't want to engage in these kind of challenges without what we call a real conscious therapeutic alliance, where there's an agreement, where you reach an agreement with the patient that here is what we are here to work on. But he wasn't able to do that with this patient. There are patients where you can't get that kind of a foothold, okay? So it's not optimal, but this is one way of working with those kind of patients where no matter how much you try, you won't get a foothold. You won't get that agreement that we are here shoulder to shoulder to work on this. So it's not optimal, but with this kind of a presentation, Davanloo is left with little choice.
So I'd like to finish. I'd like to get to the end of this by the end of the show. We can go an extra 5 minutes because we were late, only because I want there to be a resolve and a sense of like, oh, well, as a client, as a patient, I might be able to learn from this.
Yeah.
As I be a therapist to myself, sometimes I can be this gentle parent to myself. So can we do something? Can we how's it going to pan out?
How much time do we have?
We have 20 minutes.
We have 20 minutes. I don't think we'll get through it, but we can do our best.
Okay, listen, Tovah, we don't need to get through it, because what we're pointing out is this resistance.
Okay, that's fine. That's good.
Our goal is.
I want the ending to be like fairy tale, like the patient's like, wow, Doc, you're really amazing. You really helped me. You really helped me. My chronic pain is all gone.
Oh, maybe we could skip ahead. We could skip ahead a little bit.
No, look, let's not for the moment.
Okay.
Because what we're noticing is that remember, our goal in this work this morning is to help a patient understand that their resistance and the defiance worked for them once, and that it takes a lot of pressure and a lot of work to break through. Mm-hmm. So to see, when you go to have therapy, when you go to a counselor,
lots of courage. I agree.
Yes.
Very good. All right. Shall we then? Shall we keep going?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So now you said, what the hell he is asking me about the way I sit. And my question is this: how you felt when I said it?
I wish I knew. It was a question mark.
But that's a question.
Well, that's how I felt. I felt inquisitive.
But that is not a feeling. That is a sentence. Now you smile. Okay. So, having made the patient acquainted with some aspect of his character defenses and generated a rise in the transference feelings, that's in plain English, that means now the patient has some mixed complex feelings towards the therapist, right?
And is involved.
Much more involved.
Not like half an hour ago, the patient really wasn't interested. He was there because maybe his wife sent him or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas now he's engaged with Davanloo.
Yeah, and real quick, the part of the patient that is identified with his defenses, that part of the patient will be irritated or angry with the therapist. He may even experience the therapist as antagonistic. But the part of the patient that wants to be free has positive feelings towards the therapist. Okay?
Yes.
So let's see. The process now shifts to inquiry. That's very important. Remember earlier, inquiry wasn't possible. There was too much of a wall. Now the wall has softened enough where inquiry is possible. That's a big deal. This is about really getting to know the patient and understand their unique situation and their unique difficulties. So it's not just about pushing for feeling. Now that the defenses have softened enough, now he goes into inquiry, meaning really trying to get to know the patient. It's a very important point.
Yes.
So how about we skip to the, there's a lot of commentary, but let's go right to the transcript again.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rose.
Isn't it your turn? Well, Mr. H is a person that I work with.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And then again,
It's
your
yours.
eyes. Yeah. And then again, your eyes move around. You see? Do you notice you avoid me?
No, I don't think I'm trying to avoid you at all.
Uh-huh. You see your eyes move this way, that way.
Where does it say that I have to stare at you in the eyes?
Uh-huh. And you have a problem looking at my eyes?
No, but why would I want to stare at you in the eyes?
How do you feel when you look into my eyes?
Nothing. When I look at your eyes, your mouth, your nose, or the floor, we're talking. It's what we're saying that counts, really.
How you feel?
Well, you usually say what you feel. You don't talk to say nothing.
Right. So we see the wall again, right? The wall has come back because, of course, Davanloo's approach has stirred up these complex feelings, right? And so the way to push those feelings away and keep Davanloo at a distance again. Remember, just because they made some inroad doesn't mean that suddenly the patient's fear of letting someone close, that hasn't just evaporated into thin air. It's still going to rear its head.
Yeah. It's called a character defense, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very repetitive, ingrained through long-standing habit. So how about we skip the commentary and go straight to the transcript again?
Good.
So, so on page 10, Rose?
Yes, page 10, I've got it. I don't care what it looks like. What I say belongs to me.
But if you don't care, then why are you here? If you don't care to look at yourself and ramble around, then why are you here?
I guess I've got no reason to be here.
If you like the way your life is, then you can go and carry on this way. But if you want to look at it?
But if I like it?
Let me put it this way. Either you want to look at this or you don't want to look at it.
Yes.
If you don't want to look at it, then why should you be here? I mean, here we are to look at this. If you don't want to look at this, then why should you be here? Maybe you love to carry your miserable life the way you have it. Maybe you don't have to look at this. Maybe you're happy with the way it is.
Okay. Can we make a comment here?
Of course.
Yeah. During this formal head-on collision, it would be a mistake to leave a lapse of time. One head-on collision should follow another. So I just want to say that this is pushing the patient to actually admit that they've got a problem. So anyone listening and watching, just be aware that what the therapist is doing is they're allowing the patient to be challenged fully, deeply, and then to get that energy up. Previously, we saw a resistance and we saw the anger rise in the patient. So we knew that the patient is involved, but now we've got to get to the next stage. And this is important for people with somatic pain. It's important to realize that when you're reminded about your holding back, holding on, you actually haven't got an awareness that you're holding on. And here Davanloo is pushing that awareness in. Yeah.
So one more point, both of you. This is important. Davanloo is not neutral. He actually is critical of the patient's defenses. Okay. But if he was not critical of these defenses, he would actually be doing a disservice to the healthy part of the patient that is trapped underneath those defenses. Okay.
True.
So he actually makes it clear, right? It's pretty obvious, right? That Davanloo is not neutral, that he thinks it's a negative thing, right? That the patient is putting up these walls. But remember that even though he's criticizing the defenses, if he wasn't doing that, it would be like saying, I don't see your potential. I don't care about the healthy part of you that could actually liberate yourself from this. So it's kind of a healthy criticism.
Yeah. It's a motivational thing in a way, isn't it? Because then he's motivating that healthy part of the patient to rise up and get strength.
Yes, yes, yes,
And
yes.
there's no, what
Okay.
I notice is that there's no, look, it's like nobody's screaming, nobody's yelling, nobody's criticizing, nobody's blaming. It's like not a parent-child relationship.
It's not a put down. No.
Yes. And the
Yeah.
person is feeling respected. The voice, I just feel like it, because what we sometimes do in therapy is we become the child and they become the parent. And then we're just playing the same role. With this, there's respect here. There's like, well, what do you think? What do you feel? What do you think? There's no talking at you. There's sort of this dialogue. That's what I'm sensing. Again, I'm a little bit subjective, but
Yes, it's true. At the same time, Davanloo is trying to turn the patient against their defenses, where they can see that what they thought was their friend is not their friend.
wow.
Well,
Very,
that's
very
the
important.
next phase.
Yeah.
That's the next phase in our thing.
Okay, let's go.
Could I just mention head-on collision with arrogance and sarcasm as a character defense? So now we're going to look at that defensiveness of holding back and the sarcasm coming out.
Yes.
So your
And
turn.
when you approach the defenses, when you point them out like this, they're going to flare up. They're going to flare up. But from Davanloo's point of view, that's a good thing. You don't want defenses to be hiding somewhere, like having a hidden battalion of tanks back here somewhere. You want it all out in the open where you can deal with it. Okay?
Exactly.
Therapist, the question is this: do you want to look at this or not? That is the first thing that we have to settle here. If you don't want to look at it, then you shouldn't be here. Is this the way that your relationship is also with your wife? You say that Mr. H is an arrogant person, but what type of person are you?
Arrogant. I can be arrogant.
Are you arrogant here with me?
No, you make me feel like that, but I'm not.
Do you notice that you are, in a sense, what do you want to say?
Thank you.
Well, now let's look at the issue of thank you. That is another sarcastic pattern.
Again, I'm trying to say something and you won't let me talk.
Are you a sarcastic person or aren't you?
Yes, I can be very sarcastic.
Are you right now or aren't you? You say Mr. H is an arrogant person.
Yeah.
But then you said you can be an arrogant person and you said you can be a sarcastic person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's look at it. You're sarcastic here. You're evasive here.
Can I say something that I'm trying to say for the last few?
Now you're smiling.
Because I'm trying to say something. You won't let me say it.
And could we look to your smile here? Because that is part of the arrogance here.
I agree.
So maybe before I read the next thing here, this seems antagonistic and confrontational. Just remember, it is in a way, but remember that it's the resistance that Davanloo is going after. It's not the healthy part. He's actually supporting the healthy part of the patient. It may look like Davanloo is just trying to pick a fight with him, right? You can just look at this and, well, he's just picking a fight with the patient. What's he doing? But there's a method to the madness, okay?
There is, isn't there?
Yes. Okay. Agreeing is not enough. What are you going to do about it? Now, if you want to be arrogant here and you want to be sarcastic, which obviously is in other relationships as well, and I question you, is it not also with your wife as well? Now, what are you going to do about sarcasm and arrogance? Because if you're not going to do anything about it, there's no sense. We're not going to get anywhere. And now you're smiling. Again, arrogance.
Whatever I am.
Okay. Comments?
Well, I see it that what we're doing now is we're actually dealing with the defense very, very openly. And in the next little bit, we actually get something strong back out of him that we weren't able to get before. Because this head-on collision is actually wearing down the arrogance. It's just wearing down the defense. So, yeah. What did Susie say?
Yeah. That's probably more about how it seems antagonistic and maybe a little crazy. And it's true. That's why it's important to understand the metapsychology, that Davanloo is deeply respecting the healthy part of the patient. And the way he's showing that respect is that he's saying, I got your number. I see what you're doing. I'm not going to avoid talking about the main thing going on.
That's right. And of course, remember, he knows that he uses arrogance and sarcasm as his defense. So Davanloo is actually speaking to that part and breaking it down. It's sort of like crumbling it. Yes. So it's a really lovely thing to do, because normally that patient would use that defense all the time to back other people off. And now all of a sudden, Davanloo is meeting it head on and not letting it crush him. So
I have to say something. If you're a therapist, it's so important that you don't try to work like this, but you're actually acting out. You're frustrated with your patient and you're acting out. Okay, if you're going to work like this, is a very, very advanced skill. Okay, and if you don't have a lot of training, you shouldn't try to work like this. You should not try to work like this if you don't have a lot of training. We don't want therapists just acting out their own frustration and provoking the patient. It's not. It may look like that, but it's not like that with Davanloo. Okay.
Yeah. Could I also add, in a way, that when you do this head-on collision, you do it out of love.
Yes.
Because if you do it out of frustration, it will be a confrontation. But when you do it out of love, it's beautiful, because you can see the real person underneath it.
Yes.
And even as I speak about it, it just brings up a feeling in me of reaching out to another human being that's been suffering for years and years and years often.
Yes.
And you're reaching.
Yes.
Yeah. So
ideally, the commentary, ideally therapists are working on themselves, but therapists aren't perfect. We have insomnia or anxiety or depression like anyone else. We're all a work in progress. But if a therapist is going to try to work this way, it's so important that they've done their own work. We do not want therapists acting out their own aggression. That would be horrible, horrible.
Well, one of the initial things in training is that we've got to have a definite space in our head so that we can hold the person's feelings in our head and not get them connected with our own feelings. And it's so important, because you can get activated.
Because we know that the science is still telling us that, we're repressing feelings, causing the brain to react, becoming a pattern, becoming a pathway that, and so what's some take-home insights that we can apply simply, to in order to, once we know our feelings, then what I've learned, and what's been helping many people, and what Rose has learned so much working with Rose and ICDP is, to just recognize and accept. We don't have to change who we are to get out of chronic pain. We have to accept who we are. And then if we want to change something about us through accepting, it's a possibility. So can you say that in your words? Can you say that in your words about, because you guys are the expert in ICDP, and I really want to hear it from you.
But that's exactly what Davanloo did. In that, he did exactly that. He said, you don't have to be here if you don't want to be. It's for you to grow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, no, I appreciate this. And so the thing to keep in mind is that all of us, in order to survive our childhoods, in some degree or other, we had to tuck away parts of who we are. We had to trim our sails to meet the prevailing winds. I think that was Watchell. And so the foundation of that is an absence, is the antithesis of self-acceptance, right? The defenses, the very nature of defenses, are to deny parts of who we are, okay? Wow. And so we have to let that go, and that means fully accepting ourselves. But we can't do that when we hold on to those defenses, even if it's unconscious. Wow. And those defenses, this is another important premise, they can be self-destructive.
Yes.
And so we all have tendencies to be self-destructive, and Davanloo was a master at working with that, what he calls superego pathology. He was a master at it. And it requires sometimes a little bit of a forceful stance.
So if somebody isn't in a therapeutic process, how can they work with themselves to lovingly notice the defenses, see the pattern, be able to objectively say
Okay.
that's not healthy for me, and how do I scaffold it or break it down or accept it?
Okay. The reason we're doing this is to allow people to, as you say, accept themselves and notice that the syntonic defenses are syntonic. In other words, they can't see them. They're unknown to them. They're like talking about someone else. They're not that arrogance that that man has, and that what do you call it?
Sarcasm.
Yeah, he doesn't see that. He sees that as an attribute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then Davanloo has to step in to actually, in a caring way. And you see, so Susie said, whose idea is love? The idea of love is to be present with that person.
Yeah.
So,
One more comment about the more forceful part of this that can seem antagonistic. One more comment, okay. By approaching the patient that way and their wall, their resistance that way, Davanloo is modeling for the patient how to stand up to the more self-destructive part of them. Okay, by approaching,
I like that.
yeah, he's modeling. This is the kind of energy and attitude that you need to stand up to your own self-destructive side. That's the heart of it. Davanloo called it talking down to the superego, but total respect for the patient.
Wow.
Total
and that's
respect.
where the love comes in. Total respect or equals love. That whole idea of having an open heart for the patient suffering.
Wow.
Right. But it is this process of surgery. You have to cut, you have to cut open so you can get the cancer out. And for that, you have to crack the egg at some point.
Yeah. I would love to part two with this, to have a part two, because it's there's nothing new under the sun. We're stuck in many places, and most of us, it's the same process. Our stories are different, our traumas are different, our hearts are the same, love is the same. Like, we just have to practice this, and it doesn't feel safe. And that's the place a lot of people, will stay behind the wall, because even though, it's a lot here, and I'd love to continue. And
even if it's destructive, behind the wall is safer. And yet it's a lie we tell ourselves. That's why I love John Frederickson's The Lies We Tell Ourselves.
Yeah,
we tell
want to
ourselves
be honest.
that
We want to be honest, and we want to be naked. We want to really trust, because I say this. You're the doctor, you're the therapist. We can all do that. We can learn these skills and help ourselves. We do need help from therapists, but if we don't, there's hope. No one's dependent on anything, whether it's the placebo, whether it's law of attraction. We can heal ourselves. That's what John Frederickson's book is about. That's what all this is about. That's what TMS Roundtable is about. Like, take these tools, apply them, get help if you need it. I want people to feel hope. I want Susie to feel hope. I want everyone to feel hope, not to feel like I can't do it because that's a defense.
True, but this is why we're doing this today, so that people can see this is a defense that they can't see.
Good.
It's syntonic.
Yes. And it can be very helpful to have a good therapist. Obviously, it can be hard to do it on your own. My life was changed because I found a therapist that was stellar, and it turned everything around for me. So I'm a big proponent of finding a good
I have a little bit of a devil's advocate. I don't have any money. I don't have any money. I have no money. I hardly. What do I do? I want therapy. I want to work with this. I don't have any money.
Do you live in a country where you can get on health insurance?
No.
No?
What do I do?
That's a tough one. I don't have a silver bullet for you, but I would, the gods of Google might help. You Google,
Again, like, I really want to heal.
What's the answer you're looking for, Tovah?
Well, the answer is that I think that there's enough information on the internet, and that what my thing is really is to help people apply and implement. And I know that sometimes they won't be able to because of the defenses. How can I apply and implement?
Well, that's why we've got this.
Right.
Exactly.
So I think that I think there's the hope, there's the belief. This is all chemical. There's the, everyone's birthright has.
Okay, how are you going to activate it? How are you going to activate it on your own?
Yeah, take it as far as you can on your own. I personally, I can only speak for myself. I needed help. I was in my early 20s and I was a lost soul, and I needed help. But if you can do it on your own, all the power to you. But I needed help, and a lot of other people may also need help.
Well, and
Me
again,
too.
I want to answer my own question because of now, 150
Good.
shows in Hebrew and English. Again, what I saw as a thread of people healing from amazing things, what they had will, they had a desire, they had a mission, and it was like what Matt Embry calls no cheat days. Like they were disciplined to love themselves and be so compassionate and so giving. And again, this all becomes chemical. In other words, what I want to say is that people took responsibility. And someone said to me, be careful when you say that, because it's not blame, but all these people in these shows that heal chronic pain, years and years of suffering and struggling and diseases, and what is taking responsibility, which is another show. It's different for everyone taking responsibility. It's breaking down the defenses, being humble, believing in yourself, dealing with your anger to the medical community, which didn't give me what I needed. It's like this thing of like, and it's back to compassion, or what David Hanscom says is awareness. Love is awareness.
Yeah.
So we're back to the same thing. There's nothing new under the sun from Davanloo, from Sarno, from Shrubiner was on my show last week. There's nothing new.
It's hard to live an empowered life without taking some responsibility, but that is not the same as self-blame. This is true. Now, as to what you were saying before, where does this go, right? Just a little spoiler. Eventually, the patient starts to sob, and that's important because that tells us that underneath the arrogance, underneath the facade, underneath the sarcasm, underneath the dishonesty and the jerking the therapist around and all of that, there was tremendous pain.
Wow.
Yeah,
There was tremendous
suffering.
pain. And the therapist's job is to help the patient see that even though that pain is very painful, it's actually more painful to continue the status quo and push away all those feelings.
Wow. Yeah. Wonderful. Really wonderful. I mean, this had so much depth in it. And I really, yours and Rose's responses, I mean, I'm in all of your skills in this work to work with tough walls, and your patience, it's unbelievable. And it restores hope for me, for everybody, really. So I am grateful to always Rose and Johannes, to meet you again. Last time you were on with this wonderful therapist from a Buddhist point of view. So we'll have you again because you're just delightful, and really, really, really thank you so much. Rose, you want to say good morning or say anything?
Yes, I would. I'd like to address our audience and remind them that it's a good idea to have all those attributes that Tovah suggests that we have, but we don't all have them. And sometimes we're not able to self-reflect in the same manner as is recommended. And that's why this tape or this dialogue that we had is a reminder to people that they can hold, they're holding feelings back and they're giving themselves a wall of protection. And sometimes they can't get through without help.
Yes.
So,
Yes. My final words are thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we could look at Davanloo and his work. I have a huge love for him. He wasn't perfect by any means, imperfect man, but boy, did he have a lot on the ball. So I'm so honored that we could do this together. Thank you.
Thanks, Johannes. Thank you so much. It's been really great. And anyone who wants to dialogue with Johannes or anything, just put their little comment on the side.
Yeah, and Johannes has a wonderful website, and he has a YouTube that we put on the flyer. I mean, you are educating and helping and offering enormous amount of information for people to begin their self-healing process. And so we're lucky to have you on our in our tribe.
Yeah. Well,
All right, wonderful. Have a wonderful afternoon, Rose. Have a wonderful day. See you soon. Bye. Thank you so much. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay,